Hey everybody, this is Patrick Rooney. Hopefully you're having a good day. It's marked as slow this time of year. It's Christmas time, so I'm going to have an interview with a buddy of mine that I met on Twitter. This is Jason. Jason, like I said, I met him through Twitter. We've only been talking for a couple of weeks. Seems like a guy, nice guy. He's relatively new into the trade somewhat, but he's studying up a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about how he got into it. So this is part of a continuation of the Pits to Pixels type of series I've had as far as, I came from the pits. Now I'm doing electronic things like that. So, but I don't think Jason, you obviously don't have any pit experience. You ever
Oh
tried?
no,
No. Do
no,
you
I
ever get
wish.
that? You wish. Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let's see what we can do and see what we can talk about.
Okay, my name's Jason Perz. I run a small trading group called Against All Odds. Basically, a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to try to get my friends some exposure to real trading instead of the newsletters they've been reading over the last couple of years. And so I wanted to show them that it wasn't just a situation of being right all the time. It was your risk management was number one. And then basically showing my systems, because I mainly use systems to understand my trends, when I'm going to get in the position, when I'm going to get out. So that's why I started the page. And kind of showing the psychological aspects of how hard this is to learn. And I think people come to an understanding that this is really easy and they're going to get into it. And, they have a friend who told them how they made, so much money just trading the other day. And so they jump into it, they try to do it, and then they realize how hard it is, and they usually quit. So I wanted to kind of show some real experience. Other than that, I rode professional BMX bikes for about 20 years. I ran my own companies doing this, called Thriller BMX. We recently don't really have much of a company because of COVID. It's an entertainment business. It does shows for the NBA fairs and so on. So we haven't been doing that. So the last couple of years, I've just been trading basically. And so that's been cool. I also have a TED Talk. You can see that on my Twitter page. It goes through my history with addiction and dealing with injuries.
That's awesome. And I have seen your TED Talk. That was an awesome TED Talk, and I certainly enjoyed watching that. And I was glad I stumbled across that on your Twitter page. You've led a pretty fascinating life, very interesting life, and the BMX part of it. I get a kick out of too. I knew some guys when I was younger in high school and stuff. Went into BMX, did some stuff. You certainly understand risk.
Yeah, so
And things
I,
like that.
I I had a buddy send me a little clip from an interview I did probably when I was 20, so this is 15 years ago, and it was talking about somebody I had a contest that long ago, and I actually remember breaking my nose in the contest. But
Yeah.
I got up, I broke my nose back, and I kept doing the trick until I landed it. And he asked me, why would you do that? Why would you go through all that to finish something? And it reminded me what I said was, after you've gone that far, you've worked that hard, you've gone through that much, why would you stop? And
Yeah.
that kind of reminded me of my trading, because I've had a lot of really dumb things, over the years trading, trying to learn how to trade. And it's kind of like, finally, I feel like in the last few years, I'm finally coming into really grasping it. Not that I don't make stupid mistakes still,
Yeah.
but I recognize my stupid mistakes more.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's definitely interesting, and it's a journey how those both go with each other. Definitely risk management number one.
Yeah. No, and I understand the whole thing about it. I mean, you crash a lot and you just got to keep getting up. That's life, man. That really
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
You're gonna get knocked down, you're gonna fall down, and sometimes you get knocked down, you had no control over whatsoever.
yes,
The bike gives out, the dirt gives, or whatever it is, but there's stuff you can't control. And even when it is your own fault, even when you wipe out and you crash and you break your nose because you did something stupid yourself, you guys just got
yes,
to know to brush yourself off and get up. And that
yep,
relies or laurels so much in the trade and getting, and it's not just learning to trade, it's your entire
mhm,
career. Your
yeah,
entire career, you're going to find that. A buddy of mine, Anthony Cordelli, who's got a podcast, Futures Radio, he put out a tweet, I think it was this morning, that talked just about that. He's been in this game for 30 some odd years. You're still learning every day. And I've been around
yes,
that long as well, too. I've been around since 91. And dude, I probably know about, maybe an eighth of what I probably need to know to really be a top notch trader, but I keep learning and keep talking to people and learning to get along the path. So
yeah.
what do you think clicked in your head that basically said this is starting to work now?
So I'd really say over the last few years I've become profitable, and then this year really a lot of things kind of start to click. Kind of the thing of, okay, well, I would kind of take people would say certain things, and I would take that to heart. Like, oh, this guy's better than me. Why don't I listen to this guy more? Like
Yeah,
obviously he has more experience,
yeah,
and really this year is the first year I really turned that all off. Now I've never been much of a news guy, but I've always really kind of listened and tried to, and it would get to me in certain ways. This is the first year that everything was me. And I don't think that's because I'm smarter or better than anybody, is why I had such great results this year. I
yeah,
think it's because the only way you can really put on a position and hold positions and do what you need to do in trading is by really having your own convictions and having the courage to handle your own convictions.
yeah, yeah. And I absolutely agree to that. I'm a big fan of, you got to get a mentor to get into this game anyway. And I think a lot
Mhm.
of people kind of fall off now a little bit. And a mentor is not a newsletter. You need someone you can
Yes.
actually talk to. You can look them in
Yes.
the eyes. You can talk to a little bit. And it goes back to, when I get into the game, start off on the floor. You had to get someone on the floor, another broker in the pit, another trader in the pit, to actually back you with like a $50,000 T-bill. So
Yeah.
they had to put money
Wow.
basically vested in to get you into that floor, to get you trading in the first place. So you're actually standing next to that guy. You're standing in the same pit with him. So you had a mentor that was right there, right on you, and
That's
that
very
makes a
cool.
world of difference when you're learning out. And now, you have all these disparate type of places to go to learn how to trade and talk to people, and it's got to be so rough. It's got to be so much more difficult to learn how to trade now than it was back, when I kind of towed the line decades decades ago.
It's so I have Michelle Snyder
Okay.
from Market Gauge. So she's kind of been my mentor the last couple of years and really have helped me to learn some things. And but you're right, it's a situation where, like I said at the beginning, is I had so many friends who were, oh, this guy, oh, I listened to this guy and I blew up, like just
Yeah.
random things. And
Yeah.
and granted, it has nothing to do with them being great, wrong, good, bad. It just has to do with, you really have to understand what you're doing, and
Yeah.
you really have to understand what you're risking, and
Yeah.
that's the most important part. And then also you have to, there's a balance between that. There's what you're risking, and then are you scared? If your positions are too big, you're scared. So there's such a big that's such a big part of things. And you're right, it's overwhelming because there's so many newsletters now. There's
Yeah.
so many and I think, and I fell into the trap too. Is you start and you think, maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I'll read all this stuff and I'll be awesome. And then
Yeah.
you read all this stuff, and you're like, okay, and this person writes their end of the year thing, and they're like, yes, I've made 14 million%, at the end of this year because I bought this one thing, and then you realize that you didn't do that, and you're like, man, I'm actually down, 50%. And
Yeah.
so there's such a huge difference in that.
Yeah. And I understand. So how did you finally latch on to someone, not latch on is probably not a good word, but how did you finally decide who you're going to listen to and why? What was the selling point basically?
Mish, I thought was always interesting because if I would say, hey, this is interesting. Like years ago, I used to write her and send her something. I'd be like, hey, this guy's pretty interesting. She'd be like, well, it doesn't mean anything to me,
Yeah.
like. And
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? And then like, this year and last year for me, it was her saying things and me being like, well, if it fits, maybe, but it really doesn't mean that much to me, even though her opinion, her system, the way she does things, her understanding, her thought process. The process is what is really important.
Yeah.
So for me, learning this process from her of how you put on trades, why you put on trades and stuff. And even though because we were talking recently, and I'm in her group. I haven't used one of her trade ideas in probably like 6, 7 months,
Mhm.
and I moved completely to futures. She doesn't really focus on futures in the group. And so just thinking like most of these things are now coming from me, but I also know that without her leadership, I wouldn't be there doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to really go about the game and to trade it. There's not a golden ticket by any means. I think you're probably getting to that too. There's not a single path that you can really take to really learn this. And
Yes.
and I think you kind of point out something there too is really salient. And that's the fact that even if you have a mentor, you got someone that you really believe in who's trading well, and you think they know the game really well.
Mhm.
You probably don't want to do exactly what they're doing.
Yes.
You've really got to build your own game off of that. And I see a lot of that with A lot of the algo designs and trading styles that I see out there and people that I talk to where, yeah, this guy does really well because he's doing this. Is like, so I took it and I kind of changed it just a little bit because you kind of have to,
Yes.
if everyone's chasing the same nut, you're just not going to get there.
And it's also the fact if you're doing it and you just take somebody's word for it and you don't really understand it, you're not going to stick with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the most important lesson of that is, because I have guys in my group and basically every weekend I go through a list of trades, ideas, what I'm doing exactly. But I always tell them it's not a situation of you could come in and do exactly what I'm doing, but you're not going to really believe in it. When my system's going wrong, because I mean, I've had, a month of just doing things the wrong way.
Yep.
If I'm doing things wrong, you're not going to stick with it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you really have to understand your system and going, okay, well, I can be wrong 4 times in a row. And then understanding on that fourth time, you shouldn't quit it on the fourth time. You should keep going because that's probably the time you're going to start doing better.
Yeah. Kind of seems that way, doesn't it? It's just your last dollar. That's really the most important thing.
Yeah.
And there was, another guy that I follow on Twitter. He's a local in the 2-year pit. He put something out, a tweet yesterday where he commented, it's a 2-year flippers guy on there, but he put something out that's another guy that was kind of one of his mentors, Indiana Grain Trading Company. He told him a long time ago that the only thing in the market that really matters right now is the current bid and the current offer.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is just totally irrelevant. It doesn't mean a thing because if you don't know where you can get out right now, just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's the only. So simplification thoughts like that make a big leap, I think, as far as your advancement and getting into the trading game. When I'm helping me with algos and things like that too, building algos, I kind of express that to them a great deal because people think, if we're gonna do automated trading, we're doing an algo, it can be this huge, massive, web of all this logic, things going all over the place. And no, man, a lot of the stuff that people do to build algos and build trades is real simple. It's just basically, if the market bid does this and the ask does that, I'm going to get in, and that's all there is to it. There's not a great deal of over thought process into it. It's when you start thinking too much into it is when you really get into trouble, because that's when you start questioning yourself.
Yes.
And that's when you really start panicking. That's when you overtrade a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Because you start worrying about what you have there, and you're in and out much too aggressively.
Yeah. And it's for me, it was interesting this year, and it's a perfect example of that. Is so as you know, Bitcoin itself being one of the hardest things to figure out a timing system to use, it's really hard to figure it out. And so I had this one that I was using for a long time that's decent, but it's funny this year, very simple system, 2 standard deviations up, 1 standard deviation down. Very simple model, worked better than everything I've tried to use. And I've tried to use all of these different backtesting, all these different systems that just worked like crap over and over again. So it's very interesting you say that, because I think a lot of people, even a simple system like I do, because I'm not into algos. I wish I could be. I'd like to learn that. But I make simple systems, backtest them using TrendSpider or using Excel spreadsheets. And doing that, I can come up with a lot of things, but people think that it's just such an intricate thing, and really sometimes it's crossing over a certain price, sometimes it's a certain amount of days, sometimes it's a standard deviation, and it's nothing that insane.
No, that's good. So the process you have, I'm sure it evolved over time and over years. And you've got it, and you say you've got a group. So you have other traders that kind of you work with. They follow you, or how does that work? Do you have like a written out strategy that you kind of assign them and say, here, learn this or learn these steps, or how finite is that, and how kind of just like vague is that? Is it basically here's a high set of rules, or do you have kind of structured lower level rules as well?
Oh yeah, so it's basically not even some. So a newsletter is never going to show you the risk to reward. They're never going to put on a trade. They're never going to show you how many times a strategy usually works, where your stop is, what you're trying to do. And that's mainly what I try to do with my group, is going over and over again. Every single week, I come back to all the trades that are open, going through that. I use a lot of intermarket analysis. I like using things like copper, lumber, gold to silver ratio. I know we've talked about that a little bit, but and I know you're not a fan, but for me, it's the process that I use. It just works with, And
Yeah.
once again, and then that's the thing I think that's very cool about traders in general is that, like, as you know, it's like you said earlier, it's, you might not agree with it, but it could be a thing that works for somebody else, which you can understand. And that's, I think, was what's always a very interesting thing about when talking to other traders, because there's so
Yeah.
many different styles and ways of doing this.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, that in itself is a huge thing too, is just talking to the traders, and even you got to get beyond, reading stuff on Twitter and reading stuff on newsletters and things like that, because you got to have just conversations more of that. Because again,
Yes.
if I revert back to when I got into the game 30 years ago, in the pits, I was in the Eurodollar pit, there was, 3,000 people in there. So you had a lot of
Yeah.
people to exchange ideas with, as well as play liar's poker and do a lot of
Yeah.
silly stuff to let the day go by. But the exchange of ideas, you can't beat that either. You really got to hash things out. And what I found, and I had a talk on Twitter with some people about this yesterday, was that writing stuff out is just so valuable to figuring out and really get a better grasp. Because when I've got an idea, a trade strategy, any type of a marketing idea, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and I may think it's great and fantastic, and it's the best thing since sliced bread. But once I
Mhm.
start writing it out, I realize, what, you're engaged in a whole other part of your brain right now, and it's
Yes.
gonna say, what, maybe that's not the best idea in the world. So you got to write it out as such a huge thing, and just like same thing, any type of communication of that process.
Yeah.
Talking out with other traders, even if they're not saying anything back to you, if you're verbalizing that idea, as opposed to just sitting there and thinking, I should do this, done, do. No, man, you got to get it out there.
Well,
Engage
that's what's
as possible.
interesting. Yeah, that's what interests. What's very interesting about the group for me, because for me it's a situation of putting this out there, and if they're interested, great. If not, for me it's being transparent.
Yeah,
Going back to, like, from my TED talk and being in NA and AA over the years, constantly, always being open and honest about what I'm feeling, what I'm doing. That really is extremely helpful in doing anything in the world.
yeah,
And I think there's so many people on Twitter, they'll talk about what they're making and how they did this great trade and how they've in 1 year they've become the best trader ever by following this guy.
yeah,
And getting to actually see it, and then is a whole other thing. My group knows when I'm in a drawdown. My group knows when I'm having a good month, bad month, when I'm just in a bad mood because I've made like a bunch of bad trades in a row,
yeah,
and I really have to dig deep to figure out what I'm going to do at that point, and
yeah.
continue with my process. I think that's very important for me just as much as them.
Right. I sounds like you greatly understand the value of brutal honesty.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
it makes things just so much bigger. I mean, that's the worst thing in the world, is when you have to waste energy and resources trying to understand what someone's talking about because you don't really believe them to be a brutally honest person. And knowing that just makes a lot of difference. I mean, I would much rather have someone sit there and tell me what an idiot I am, if they can back it up and verify it, than try and
Yes.
punt around and say, oh, you're going to be fine. Say no. No, be honest with me. Tell me what's really going on here. So
There's a
yeah,
interesting, you bring up another interesting point. My buddy and I, we were having a conversation. There's a trader friend we know that's he's running a group in a service now, and we also know that he doesn't really trade, and he had a paper trading account and all these things. So I went back and I was trying to have a conversation with him. He continues, every time I try to talk to him about it, he kind of deflects and goes away. But I told my other buddy who also knows that he really doesn't do this, about a time when I had a friend who he just basically told me straight up, like, you don't listen. It was with trading.
yeah,
One of my first years, he's like, you don't listen, you're hard-headed, like he told me everything, I didn't want to hear, but I needed to hear, and to this day, like, I love that person so much for just
yeah,
saying the things I needed to hear at that time, because I could have sat there and been hard-headed for the rest of time and thought, I knew shit, when, now being into 2020, I still, even though I've learned a lot, I don't feel like I know anything. I feel like I learn something new every day, and I don't know shit most of the time.
yeah. That's exciting. That's the exciting thing about it, though. I mean, you hunt for things to learn sometimes, and a lot of times the things are just thrown right at you. And it's like, you got to be open to that. And that's something I have trouble with. And I think we all have trouble with it a good deal, is you're not open to new ideas enough, and not open to not open to the thought that you might be wrong, not open to new ideas, and just the fact that, hey, this might be a better way to do it. And it's
Yeah.
hard sometimes to really gather that in and grasp it and really run with it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So tell me about your group. How many people you have in the group, and what are you guys trading?
I have 50 people in the group. I mainly focus on futures and sectors. I like to trade the cycles long term, and then also mainly just the futures groups. So I trade everything in futures, basically. I mean, we have a canola trade on right now. Basically, any commodity I'm probably have some setup on. So basically everything across the board: currencies, commodities, crypto, gold, silver. Mainly silver these days. I don't tend to trade gold itself. I like some of the miners from time to time in my long-term portfolio, but I really don't care to trade gold itself these days. Seems just a little too slow for me. I might as well be in a currency these days.
It's weird. Gold. I talk about gold a lot on Twitter and LinkedIn and places, and talk that game. But I also admit very openly, I'm the worst gold trader ever. I can't call that market to save my life, but I like trying to a lot. I still keep throwing my hat in that game, but it's an interesting market.
It's an interesting market, and for me, it's really the cycle really kind of tells me what's going on with it. Is it time to get bullish on it based on? I like to look at rates over everything. A lot of people I think like to look at the dollar for gold. I really like to look at rates. I want to see the miners moving. I want to see silver moving. And then I might say, okay, gold looks good, but once again, it's not something I want to trade. It's a little too slow for me, but I enjoy the market definitely.
It's interesting you talk about the dollar with it, because I actually wrote something yesterday and put it on LinkedIn that was along those lines exactly. It's like, dollar is getting just hammered, just absolutely destroyed.
Yes.
Why isn't gold above $2,000?
Yeah. So I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I read that, and it's very interesting because bonds and gold can go up at the same time, and most of the time that happens, it's usually people with rates going down. People start to get worried about currency debasement, and so then you'll see that, but that's late cycle, and that's usually when we don't see any risk on in things like copper will start going down, silver will start looking bad, but gold will outperform. And that's only on the rare occasion. It's usually a late cycle environment, which we did see in 2019, we kind of saw that. Silver was really, really lagging. This precious metals bull market kind of looks more constructive this year. This looks like it could continue to go because of the way the risk environment is moving on. The juniors, the gold juniors are moving a lot better than they were. Gold miners are moving a lot better than they were. So we'll see where we end up with that. But once again, it's a very tough market.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right. Well, listen, it's been good talking to you. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? You want to get into, or?
No, that's good, man. That's great.
Okay.
Really great. I really appreciate you taking the time and talking with me. It's very cool to learn from you on Twitter. Well, always listening to things you're saying, ideas you're putting out there, reading your LinkedIn stuff. So it's very cool. Thanks for taking the time.
I appreciate that, and send me some stuff, and I'll add it to the notes on this, and I post it out there, and we'll get it out there, and let's do it again sometime.
Cool. Thanks, Patrick.
All right, take care. Merry Christmas. Bye.
Take it easy. You too.